There was a time when American backyards weren't just for mowing, grilling, and the occasional 4th of July fireworks. They were full of life, lush with vegetables, herbs, and traditions passed down through generations. Gardens weren't just hobbies. They were practical, feeding families and ensuring no food went to waste. But somewhere between fast food supermarkets and suburban lawn culture, we lost touch with these backyard essentials. Today, we are digging into 15 classic garden features that were once a staple of American life, but have all but disappeared. Before greenhouses became common, gardeners had a simpler solution: cold frames. These were like miniature, low-to-the-ground greenhouses made of wood and old window panes. They worked by trapping heat from the sun, creating a warm microclimate that let gardeners start seeds earlier in the spring and keep greens growing well into winter. You didn't need electricity or fancy equipment, just a little know-how and some scrap materials. Many families repurposed old storm windows or glass doors, setting them at an angle over a wooden box to maximize sun exposure. A well-built cold frame could turn a chilly spring morning into a cozy 70-degree paradise for lettuce, spinach, and carrots. But as store-bought produce became more accessible, the need for cold frames dwindled. Today, you'd be hard-pressed to find one in a suburban backyard, though there's still a smart way to stretch a growing season. Long before plastic playhouses and jungle gyms, children had something better: a bean teepee. With just a few tall sticks or bamboo poles tied at the top and runner beans planted at the base, this simple structure became a shady, living hideaway. By midsummer, the vines climbed the poles, covering the teepee with bright green leaves and dangling bean pods. Not only was it fun for kids, but it was also practical, providing a steady harvest of green beans throughout the season. Parents loved it because it kept kids entertained and engaged with nature. But as gardening became less common and plastic toys filled the backyard, bean teepees started disappearing. Today, they're a rarity, but if you've got grandkids, this is one garden feature worth bringing back. During World War II, nearly every American home had a victory garden. The idea was simple: growing your own food helped reduce pressure on commercial food supplies and supported the war effort. It wasn't just about patriotism, it was about self-sufficiency. Families grew tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, and potatoes in their backyards. Even city dwellers used rooftops and community plots to do their part. After the war ended, the habit stuck for a while, but as grocery stores expanded and processed foods became the norm, the backyard vegetable garden started fading away. These days, people are slowly rediscovering the benefits of growing their own food. But victory gardens as a national movement, that's been all but forgotten. Every old garden had one: the Rhubarb Patch, tucked away in some forgotten corner near the garage or fence line. These hardy plants came back year after year, no matter how much neglect they suffered. Rhubarb is tough. It can withstand harsh winters, requires little care, and produces thick, tart stalks perfect for pies, jams, and sauces. Back in the day, it was a staple ingredient in homemade desserts, often paired with strawberries for that perfect sweet-tart combination. But today, rhubarb has vanished from most backyards. People either don't have the patience to wait for it to establish, or simply don't think about growing it. If you ever visit an old farmhouse, though, there's a good chance you'll still spot a forgotten rhubarb patch hanging on. Before chemical pesticides and fertilizers, gardeners relied on something much simpler: companion planting. The idea was that certain plants helped each other grow when planted together. Marigolds kept bugs away from tomatoes. Basil made tomatoes taste better. Beans fixed nitrogen in the soil for corn, while squash provided ground cover to prevent weeds. This wasn't just an old wives' tale. It was knowledge passed down through generations. And it worked. But as commercial farming took over and backyard gardens shrank, this wisdom faded. Today, companion planting is making a quiet comeback, but most modern gardeners rely on store-bought solutions instead. Before refrigerators became standard, families stored their vegetables the old-fashioned way, in a root cellar. These underground storage areas stayed cool year-round, preserving potatoes, carrots, onions, and other root crops for months. Some even had separate sections for apples, cabbages, and canned goods. It was a practical, energy-free way to keep food fresh. But as modern homes were built without basements, root cellars became a thing of the past. These days, some homesteaders and off-grid enthusiasts are bringing them back. But for most people, the concept of a root cellar is little more than a history lesson. There was a time when many backyards had a wooden arbor covered in thick, twisting grape vines. By midsummer, they were dripping with juicy fruit, perfect for fresh eating, juicing, or winemaking. These grape arbors provided natural shade, attracted pollinators, and looked absolutely stunning. They were a source of pride for many gardeners. But somewhere along the way, fresh grapes became something you bought at the grocery store. Backyard grapevines started disappearing, replaced by fences and flower beds. If you have the space, though, planting a grape arbor could be one of the best ways to bring a bit of old-fashioned charm and fresh fruit back into your garden. Another plant that became part of almost every garden was asparagus. But asparagus isn't like most vegetables. You don't plant it one year and harvest it the next. It takes time, usually about 3 years before it really starts producing. But once it's established, an asparagus bed can last for decades. Some old garden patches are over 50 years old and still grow fresh spears every spring. In the past, families planted asparagus because they knew it was a long-term investment. Today, with everyone wanting quick results, most people don't have the patience to wait. And that's too bad, because if you start an asparagus bed today, it could still be feeding your family 20 years from now. This one's ancient and rare, but it popped up in old American homesteads, especially in the Southwest. Gardeners would bury unglazed clay pots, ollas, with just the top exposed and fill them with water. The water slowly seeped out through the porous clay directly into the soil, where roots could drink as needed. It saved water, encouraged deep root growth, and required almost zero effort. In a time before timers and drip irrigation, this was pure genius, and mostly forgotten now. Some permaculture folks are rediscovering it, but your great-grandparents may have used it without ever giving it a name. Before there were plastic tunnels and garden fabric, gardeners protected young plants with cloches, small bell-shaped covers made of glass, or even cut-off plastic jugs. They worked like individual mini greenhouses, shielding seedlings from frost, pests, and sudden weather changes. It was common to walk through a spring garden and see rows of little glass domes glistening in the sun. They looked almost magical, like snow globes sitting in the soil. But as gardening became less hands-on, the cloche went away. These days, people rely on commercial row covers or more often just plant later in the season. But still, there's something special about the old method, as it is simple, elegant, and effective. Alright, this one's for the truly hardcore gardeners, the infamous stink bucket. People would toss nettles, comfrey leaves, or even fish scraps into a bucket of water, let it sit and rot for a few weeks, then strain off the liquid. The result, a potent liquid fertilizer packed with nutrients. It smelled awful, but the garden loved it. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't store-bought, but man, did it work. These days, folks are more squeamish, and garden centers have rows of odorless plant food. But old-school gardeners knew, the stinkier the bucket, the better the soil. After harvest, onions weren't tossed into plastic crates, but they were carefully braided together by the tops and hung in cool, dry places like sheds, basements, or even kitchen pantries. These long, twisted ropes of onions weren't just practical, they were beautiful. A good onion braid was a point of pride and a visual reminder that the garden had provided. Today, you're more likely to see onions in mesh bags from the store. But some homesteaders and heirloom gardeners still carry on the tradition. If you've ever seen one hanging in an old farmhouse, you know it's a work of art as much as a storage method. If you ever visited your grandparents' house in the summer, you might remember finding tiny sun-warmed strawberries growing in a patch that seemed to spread every year. Unlike store-bought strawberries, which are bred for size and shelf life rather than flavor, homegrown strawberries were smaller, juicier, and packed with real sweetness. The problem was that strawberries need a little patience. The plants take a year to establish before they really start producing, and once they do, they spread aggressively, sending out runners to create new plants. For older generations, this was a feature, as it meant endless strawberries without much effort. These days, people will spend $5 on a plastic clamshell of berries rather than grow their own, never knowing that a single strawberry patch can provide fruit for years. When herbs like thyme, oregano, sage, and rosemary were ready to be preserved, people bundled them and hung them upside down from the rafters or string lines, clipped with old-fashioned clothespins. The smell was incredible, like walking into a natural apothecary. The bunches would slowly dry over the weeks, and then they'd be crumbled into jars or reused for stews and teas. In many homes, these bunches doubled as decoration, hanging in kitchens or mudrooms like rustic, leafy chandeliers. Today, we often reach for neatly packaged herbs from supermarket shelves, sealed in uniform tins and jars. But not so long ago, dried herbs carried personal stories and a sense of place. One of the best parts of old-school gardening wasn't what you grew, it was what you shared. When tomato plants exploded in August, you didn't let the extras rot. You packed up a basket and brought them to the neighbors. It wasn't uncommon for people to leave zucchinis on porches, trade cucumbers for eggs, or swap canning jars with friends down the street. Today, we post pictures of our harvests online, but back then, the joy was in giving, feeding your community from your own backyard. That kind of generosity, it's one of the best garden traditions we've ever had, and maybe the one we need most right now.